Your Excellencies and distinguished leaders, I come from Kenya, and that's the place I call it home. I won my first World Championships in 2003, and this summer I successfully defended my Olympic medal in marathon. I am lucky to say I have a long career. Today, I want to share the secret of my success with you, because I believe you can apply it too, and it will lead you to be successful in fighting climate change. Until a few years ago, I trained by listening to what my body was telling me. I was successful and won almost every marathon I raced here. But when I realized I wanted to leave a legacy on the sport and run the world record, I knew I needed to do more. To achieve my legacy, I needed to advance my approach. I collected the brightest minds around me to help add data and new technologies in my training, so I could become more efficient and run times that no human has run before me. I started using data such as heart rate, sleep monitor, and even glucose monitor. We developed a shoe that was so full of innovation and new technologies that it protects us so well from the earth impact from the ground that I can now go for a run the day after a marathon. But feeling has always remained the key driver. I use data to confirm my feeling and make small adjustments to improve. I was adding data and innovation in technology helped me. In October 12, 2019, I became the first human ever to run the marathon under 2 hours. Something that was not thought possible until at least the year 2025. We are here today to speak about climate change. And also in Kenya, it's obvious that the world is going into the wrong direction. In Kenya, we live close to the equator, so there are no seasons. We only have periods in the year that we call the long rains, the short rains. But the rains haven't been the same for a while now. They often hardly bring any water, or sometimes they flood our farm fields, ruining all the crops. When I look to our world, I see the same metaphor as I see my career. There are Western countries who are so advanced with data and innovation, but whom are further removed from that initial feeling for the climate. Whereby in Africa, we feel so closely. What's changing, but don't adequately use data and innovation to make an impact. Today, I urge all of us to bring our worlds together, whereby we can combine our unique skills of staying connected to our feeling added by the strengths of data and technical innovations. I know the success this combination can bring, and I know we will have a bright future if we can succeed in working together. The planet is in our dear hands. We have the will, we have the knowledge, we have the expertise, and we have the resources to change it. As the saying goes this way, in Canada, in a nursery school in Canada, it's written, the first time to plant a tree was 25 years ago. But the best and the great time to talk and act on climate change is today. Let us act. I thank you all.
Good. Thank you. What an incredible treat to have a double Olympic gold medal winner give us his vision of the importance of forests. Can we have a loud round of applause? The way in which we protect our forests is a symbol of the protection of so many people. Those lungs were necessary to give us an Olympic winner. And now I would like to pass on to the next session. If we can match Kipchoge's marathon race in the way in which we dedicate ourselves to forest, and I think this session will be another very inspiring call to action. Our next agenda item is going to highlight the potential to scale up carbon finance, to support efforts for the protection of forests, but also, very importantly, to halt and reverse forest loss. Can I please call to the stage Alan Jope, CEO of the incredible company Unilever, Jennifer Tauli Corpus from Niatero, His Excellency Sir Bahadur Duba, Prime Minister of Nepal, and a very special moderator for this session, Tarja Badegashin. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm really excited to host today's session. In this session, we will learn about the LEAF Coalition. LEAF stands for Lowering Emissions by Accelerating Forest Finance. Launched at the Earth Day Climate Summit in April this year, the LEAF Coalition is a major new public-private market-based effort to protect tropical forests. To meet the Paris temperature goal, we must halt deforestation and restore millions of hectares of forest by 2030. To achieve this, we must substantially increase the flow of finance and crucially mobilize private capital. Strong voluntary carbon markets can be a key enabler for private investment in this area. Demand in these markets is growing in line with corporate net zero targets alongside a drive to eliminate deforestation from corporate supply chains and to become nature positive, all of which is critically needed to keep 1.5 alive. But with the proliferation of growth of carbon markets come concern about their integrity. Voluntary carbon markets must truly accelerate the climate action needed to achieve 1.5. And these markets must meet the expectations of both the buyers and the sellers. To address these concerns, we at the VCMI are working with key stakeholders across voluntary carbon markets, including countries. Like LEAF, VCMI is focused on best practice for the future of voluntary carbon markets. Our work ensures that as these markets transform, they contribute to the achievement of the Paris temperature goal and are additional to science-based action to decarbonize. We are here today to talk about the LEAF Coalition in this context. To open our conversation, I am joined by Alan Jope, CEO of Unilever, one of the key global businesses who have committed to backing this groundbreaking initiative. Alan, can you tell us why Unilever got involved in the LEAF Coalition and why high-integrity carbon markets matter to your business?
Sure. Thank you, Terry, and good morning. And I am here on behalf of Unilever, but also on behalf of all the LEAF partners. I think we all come here to Glasgow with high ambition, in the belief that 1.5 degrees has to become one of the organizing principles of the world's economy. And I think there's a cardinal truth. We can only deliver 1.5 degrees if we end and reverse deforestation. So to achieve that, we need to create economic incentives that keep trees in the ground. And this LEAF initiative, Lowering Emissions by Accelerating Forest Finance, brings together the demand and the supply side that will keep trees in the ground. So on the demand side, you've got companies that have got high quality, 1.5 degree aligned SBTI targets. And on the supply side, countries like Nepal who want to protect their own reservoirs of natural capital, their tropical forests. And there's strict rules around how this supply and demand is matched. On the demand side, we're only able to access leaf if it comes on top of lowering our emissions through every other available mechanism. And on the supply side, payments are only being made to jurisdictions that are protecting their natural capital when those are thoroughly verified by independent parties. Now, I think everybody on leaf, on the demand and the supply side, are aware that the best carbon storage technology that is available is nothing other than trees. Unilever has committed to end deforestation in our supply chain by 2023. Our value chain has got thousands of smallholder farmers in it, and leaf doesn't just protect the natural capital, it protects their ability to make a living income or a living wage. And so we hope that leaf will not only keep carbon in the ground, leaf will end this false binary choice of choosing between the economy and the environment. So we now have many multinational corporations, over 20 corporations, that have made over $1 billion in pledges, with more to come. Most importantly, the total emissions reductions now have surpassed initial expectations. The Glasgow Leaders' Declaration on Forests and Land Use has now covered almost 90% of the world's forest estate across 110 countries, and these will be the focus areas for LEAF's work. So we can only achieve 1.5 degrees by ending deforestation, not pausing deforestation, not slowing deforestation, not fudging deforestation, but ending deforestation. That is Unilever's ambition, and Tarai, that is the ambition of LEAF.
Thank you. Thank you, Alan. So, Jing, you are the global policy and advocacy lead for Niatero, which works with Indigenous peoples and local communities, helping them protect their lands and waters. And I, as a Nigerian who grew up in the Niger Delta, a region with one of the world's tropical forest systems juxtaposed on fossil-based extractive sectors, we have seen how delicate the nexus is between local community, capital, and the environment. How could carbon markets work well for those most affected, Indigenous people and local communities?
Thank you, Iyaman Taria, for the question. Gawis ay agaw yu amin, sakun si Jing, nagapuak at busaw, isnan bilbilig, isnan Pilipinas. Kagagasing ko ay maki, gaggag ay kanda kayo, idwani. I'm just greeting you in my Indigenous language, the language of my ancestors from the mountains of Busao Mountain Province in the Philippines. And Indigenous peoples, as you know, as Hindu has said earlier, have contributed the least to climate change, and yet we stand to suffer the most from its effects because of our close relationship with nature. We've heard the statistics. Although we are only 5% of the global population, our territories harbor 80% of the remaining biodiversity. We also have 22% of the above-ground carbon in our forests. This has been confirmed by intergovernmental science panels. They have recognized that Indigenous peoples have been doing a good job related to biodiversity conservation and carbon sequestration. And various studies have confirmed that protection and recognition of tenure of Indigenous peoples is the most efficient and effective way to protect the environment. So my organization, Niatero, recognizes the important role that Indigenous peoples play in protecting the planet. We believe that where Indigenous peoples are thriving, nature and ecosystems thrive as well. This is why we concentrate our work in supporting place-anchored peoples who maintain spiritual and reciprocal relationships with nature. We respect their self-determined visions of how their ecosystems should be maintained, and we also recognize and strengthen their governance so that they are able to carry out what they have been doing since time immemorial. Our partners believe that ocean is kin and that all beings within their ecosystems should be honored and are relatives. So voluntary carbon markets and the LEAF Coalition in particular, with its recognition of the Cancun safeguards, needs to honor this relationship and this spirituality and reciprocity. Therefore, jurisdictions that apply for LEAF must ensure that free, prior, and informed consent of Indigenous peoples is sought and obtained before their territories can be included. And as we wait for Article 6 negotiations to be concluded, it is important for the voluntary carbon markets to show the way, to engage Indigenous peoples as full partners, and to leverage what Indigenous peoples have been doing since time immemorial, so that we reach the goals of the Paris Agreement as well as the UNFCCC. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Your Excellency, what is Nepal's vision for protecting its forests, and what role do you see for carbon markets?
Nepal envisions to increase its forest cover to 45% by 2030. Forest will play a key role in our net zero ambition to become carbon negative after 2045. Nepal's forest sector will increase its role as a carbon sink. We hope to attain net zero deforestation by 2030. Nepal has been a global leader on community forests. To build on this success, international climate finance is necessary. Therefore, Nepal supports Glasgow Declaration and believes that it will help unlock climate finance, reserves, forest biodiversity, loss, and play a vital role in achieving 1.5 degree Celsius goal. Voluntary carbon market will play an important role in our mitigation efforts. Nepal has been engaging in the Forest Carbon Partnership Facility since 2010. We are implementing emission reduction initiative to secure performance-based payment that will be equitably channeled to Indigenous people, local communities through the benefit sharing mechanism. Nepal also gives importance to lowering carbon emissions and accelerating forest finance instruments. In all our engagement in utilizing forest carbon market, Nepal gives high priority to maintaining social and environmental safeguards. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Excellency. Initiatives like the Public-Private LEAF Coalition herald a step change in the mobilization of private finance for our forests. Today's announcement that the LEAF Coalition has met its $1 billion target to mobilize finance for the protection of forests is a huge achievement. This announcement is an important step in building high-integrity voluntary carbon markets at scale. Crucially, though, these markets must and will be accessible, fair, and transparent. This will give clarity and confidence to all countries on the role that voluntary carbon markets can play in unlocking vital climate change finance and delivering ambitious NDCs. Most importantly, they'll be used by buyers in addition to ambition science-based decarbonization and not as an alternative. It's our role at the VCMI to raise the bar across the market, enabling a level playing field in which all buyers are clear in the role that high-integrity voluntary carbon markets can play in keeping 1.5 alive. Further details on the LEAF Coalition will be presented by governments, forest countries, and corporate participants during the course of the week, including Finance Day and at the high-level events hosted by the US on the 3rd and the Nordic Pavilion on the 5th. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Tahia, and thank you all for a very important session. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, may we continue to give them a round of applause. Thank you so much. It is now my pleasure to introduce a very important video outlining the incredible role that is being played by multilateral development banks, supporting the mobilization of finance in favor of forests. So please, may we play the video now.
The Asian Development Bank recognizes that protecting nature is essential to addressing climate change and building prosperity for all. We endorse this common agenda to mainstream nature across our operations.
Without nature, we have no life. Without life, we have no people. Without people, we have no planet. Let us save nature, people, and the planet. Let us give back to nature, for nature preserves all of us. Thank you very much.
On behalf of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, I'm pleased to endorse the joint statement of MDBs on nature, people, and planet, launched at Cop26 today. In financing infrastructure for tomorrow, AIIB prioritizes green infrastructure, including integration of nature-based solutions to support economic development in Asia and beyond.
I am Leyen, President of the Caribbean Development Bank. It gives me great pleasure to fully support the MDB joint statement on nature, people, and planet. We commit to work diligently with our borrowing member countries to invest in nature-based solutions for enhancing resilience and promoting sustainable livelihoods.
Nature is at the foundation of our civilization. In the past 30 years, EBRD has set environmental protection as a key priority. With this statement on nature, people, and planet, we commit to do more to preserve our collective natural capital.
The European Investment Bank endorses the commitments on nature made in the joint statement, which will necessitate the convergence of our respective climate and biodiversity agendas in order to effectively respond to the two planetary emergencies. EIB stands ready to partner globally to make it happen.
Assalamu alaikum. On behalf of the Islamic Development Bank, it is my pleasure to endorse the joint MDB statement on nature, people, and planet.
Once again, another very exciting commitment that we have brought you today. It is now my pleasure to bring forward the President of the Inter-American Development Bank, Maurizio Claver Caron, on the Multilateral Development Bank's commitment to the Nature Positive Agenda. Please, Maurizio, join us on the stage. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and thank you, Prime Minister Johnson, and greetings to all of my fellow distinguished participants. And let me begin by thanking the Government of the United Kingdom for the hospitality and for convening this meeting, which is so important for all of us. Today, I am honored to represent a group of multilateral development banks that are committing to the goal of putting nature and climate at the heart of all the work we do. The banks signing today represent the leading edge of development assistance, and they include my own, the Inter-American Development Bank, the African Development Bank, the Asian Development Bank, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, the Caribbean Development Bank, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, the European Investment Bank, the Islamic Development Bank, and of course, the World Bank Group. When the United Kingdom approached the IDB to lead the work in negotiating this joint statement on nature, people, and the planet, which we're endorsing today, it was really an important acknowledgement of two key points. First, that Latin America and the Caribbean plays a crucial role within the global imperative for bold action on climate change and nature. And second, it was an acknowledgement that the leaders hosting us today recognize the need to move from pledges to action, as we heard my friends President Duque and Prime Minister Motley so eloquently say on this stage. Most IDB countries are not major contributors to climate change, but more importantly, we're the biggest proponents of action to address it. Latin America and the Caribbean is both among the world's most biodiverse regions and the most at risk to climate impacts. And the ramifications of rising temperatures and the degradation of nature in our countries spill well beyond our borders. What happens in Latin America and the Caribbean affects the entire world. Climate change is jeopardizing the water and food sources that in our region nourish the world. They're endangering the CO2 sponges that are our rainforests, and they're threatening to unleash unprecedented climate-induced migration crises. Now, in recognizing this as an existential threat, all of us must be clear about the concrete actions required to protect Latin America, the Caribbean, and such, henceforth, the entire planet. Also, today serves as an acknowledgement of the IDB, of the Inter-American Development Bank's work. After a long history of advancing sustainable development models, we have redoubled our effort over the past year of my presidency to lead the climate and nature agendas focused on not words, rhetoric, but results. Not just commitments, but results. And that's precisely why action on climate change and biodiversity is enshrined at the core of our plan for the sustainable recovery and growth of Latin America and the Caribbean, what we call Vision 2025. For our region, as is the rest of the world, natural capital must be treated as the cornerstone of post-pandemic recovery, of an opportunity for a new era of sustainable, inclusive growth. And it's a fact that by protecting irreplaceable ecosystem services, we can create jobs, we can generate income, we can mobilize the private sector investment that is frankly essential to our hopes for a climate-positive future. It's a win-win-win. So we must acknowledge that every $1 million in nature-based investments creates more than 10 times the number of jobs that the equivalent would do an investment in fossil fuels. Again, it's a win-win. It's not a zero-sum game. Furthermore, we must leverage innovative financial tools and partnerships. We must generate bankable projects and tap into new resources to turn those statements into actions. And that's our goal. With today's signing, the MDBs are committing to further mainstream nature in our operations and in our strategies. And doing so is going to lead to more nature finance and more projects and instruments to reverse nature loss and promote the protection, restoration, and the sustainable use of resources. We affirm our goal to promote green financing tools and to build an understanding of dependencies in nature and the financial risks that are posed by nature loss. For the countries we serve in Latin America and the Caribbean, we are redoubling our pledges to help them develop policies, investment frameworks, and agreements that better value natural assets while also advancing climate goals. But we have to work together, including to support nature-based solutions within the nationally determined contributions and long-term strategies, such as the one, for example, that the IDB in France recently helped Colombia launch just here at Cop26 yesterday. Today's MDB statement also underscores our goal to increasingly mobilize private finance for investments in nature. We at the IDB, we have an action plan to push well past Paris alignment and to help our countries do the same. In fact, our institution is taking the most aggressive approach in its 6-decade history on all of these fronts, from our growing Amazon initiative that emphasizes the bioeconomy, to blended finance models and accelerators that promote bio-businesses, and this is really exciting, to a new natural capital asset class, which we just listed on the Natural and the New York Stock Exchange, that's going to break all the old paradigms by rewarding countries and companies for nature positive management. I get so excited, I almost break the mic. And so like everyone here listening, I'm hopeful that this year's COP, that here, the international community is not only going to be signing names to goals or make yet another commitment, but instead that we're agreeing to take concrete and ambitious steps to realize the development potential of green and nature in recovery. And that's the message from the group of multilateral development banks here today. And the message is we must truly use our important commitments on nature and climate as catalysts for emboldened action and a new way of operating. So I, along with my colleagues, am proud to endorse this statement and to continue working with all of the MDBs to realize ambitious results. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your commitment. Thank you for speaking about turning words into action. There are many who have questioned the validity of these commitments, and let's be clear, we've gone far beyond any commitments ever made with regard to the protection of forests, the regeneration, and it is because of the efforts of both the public and the private sector that we have seen this come to fruition. This marks the end of our first session. I would now like to invite the world leaders who are here to go to the VIP room for a family photo. Those of you who would like to stay during the break, and I urge you not to leave, you will see that we will play a video with some leaders that you will never potentially have believed would come behind, once again, this Glasgow Declaration. The point is, we now have more than 110 leaders that have signed, and some of those leaders will be here in this video. So I urge you to stay. Those of you who will be joining us, please join us again at 11:20 sharp, where we will open also with His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales. Thank you, distinguished guests, for your attention.
Forests don't just matter. They are crucial for the survival of all species, human beings included. Forests contribute to mitigating greenhouse gases emissions, adapting to the impacts of climate change, and protecting water sources and biodiversity. In Colombia, 52% of our territory is covered with forest. That is why we have committed to zero deforestation by 2030, especially because 15% of GHG global emissions come from cutting down tropical forests. Achieving the ambitious goals that we have set upon ourselves across the different environmental agreements will depend on our effectiveness to protect the forests. We must renew our commitment to defend forests and increase efforts with concrete actions in agriculture, sustainable consumption and production, and international finance. Now is the time to fight climate change, which requires urgent actions by all countries. This is our moment. This is our time. We must all act together.
Уважаемый господин премьер-министр, дамы и господа, рад возможности приветствовать участников заседания по вопросам управления лесным хозяйством и землепользованием. Убежден, сохранение лесов и других природных экосистем является одной из ключевых составляющих международных усилий по решению проблемы глобального потепления, сокращения эмиссии парниковых газов. Эта тема органично вписывается в многоплановую повестку дня климатической конференции в Глазго. Поставив задачу построения углеродно-нейтральной экономики не позднее 2060 года, Россия опирается в том числе и на уникальный ресурс имеющихся у нас лесных экосистем. Их значительный потенциал по поглощению углекислого газа и выработке кислорода. Ведь в нашей стране расположено около 20% всех мировых лесных массивов. Мы принимаем самые серьезные и энергичные меры для их сохранения. Совершенствуем управление лесным хозяйством. Боремся с незаконными вырубками и лесными пожарами. Увеличиваем площади лесовосстановления. Последовательно наращиваем финансирование на эти цели. Россия поддерживает предложенный к утверждению на сегодняшнем заседании проект совместной декларации по лесам и землепользованию. Рассчитываем, что ее реализация будет стимулировать более тесное партнерство всех заинтересованных государств в деле сбережения лесов. Это, несомненно, послужит достижению целей Парижского соглашения по снижению содержания углекислого газа в атмосфере. Хотел бы пожелать всем нам uspехов на этом пути e всего самого доброго. Благодарю вас за внимание.
Florestas são importantes para mim porque cobrem mais de 60% do meu país. São fonte de saúde e vida e abrigam as maiores riquezas naturais e a maior biodiversidade do planeta. Assumimos o compromisso de eliminar o desmatamento ilegal até 2030. Faço um chamado a todos os países para que ajude a defender todas as florestas, inclusive com recursos adequados, em benefício de todos.
Forests matter to me because Canada is the third most forested country in the world. La nature fait partie de notre identité. Canada is working to protect 30% of our lands and oceans by 2030. We're planting 2 billion trees. We're protecting and restoring wetlands, grasslands, and peatlands. And we're supporting Indigenous-led conservation and guardian programs. Ensemble, luttons contre les changements climatiques et la crise de la nature.
El Perú cuenta con 72 millones de hectáreas de bosques naturales. En el 56% de nuestro territorio se encuentran los pueblos indígenas que conviven con una flora y fauna mega diversa de la que viven y de la que los protegen ellos mismos. Por ello, el Perú apoya la declaración de Glasgow sobre los bosques, en tanto expresa nuestro compromiso en materia de conservación y uso sostenible de nuestra Amazonía en el contexto del cambio climático y la lucha contra la deforestación.
Les forêts et les tourbières du bassin du Congo, qui séquestrent la plus importante réserve de carbone au monde, constituent désormais la vanne d'aération essentielle et l'ultime bouclier écologique au service de l'Afrique et de l'humanité entière. Mon pays, la République du Congo, qui œuvre aux côtés d'autres États frères à la préservation et à la gestion durable de ces écosystèmes forestiers, en appelle à la solidarité agissante des partenaires techniques et financiers, ainsi qu'au respect des engagements pris dans le cadre de l'accord de Paris, à l'effet de préserver durablement ce patrimoine commun.
Hello all. Papua New Guinea is home to 6 to 7% of world's biodiversity and the third largest tropical rainforest of the world, the lungs of the earth. The world needs oxygen. We need biodiversity for world's healing. We need our oceans to be healthy and pollution-free. And as the current chair of the Coalition for the Rainforest Nations, we stand committed to contributing to and ensuring that we keep the Paris Agreement goal alive and achievable. We believe that mobilizing resources and forging partnerships is key to the actions that we have to undertake domestically to implement the Paris Agreement beyond Glasgow. We are committed to protecting our forests and be the leader in ensuring the immense amount of carbon cleansing forest is intake for our future generation. Thank you and God bless you all.
Forests
matter to me because they have the best technology we have for removing CO2 from the atmosphere and storing carbon. They also provide priceless ecosystem services. We must all work together to find ways to keep them standing.
Dear Excellencies, forests matter. Our mere survival depends on them. In Costa Rica, we have committed in our enhanced NDC to bring deforestation of old-growth forests to zero by 2030 and to maintain at least 60% of our country with forest cover. We urgently need to acknowledge the importance of forests and increase their protection, as it will be key to tackle the crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss, and land degradation. I foresee a future where people and forests coexist harmoniously. This is not only possible, but necessary. Thank you.
Forests matter to us as it is at the center of our livelihood and climate resilience. Nepal's community forest is recognized globally as an inclusive and effective way for conservation and implementing climate change mitigations. Our climate commitment to maintain 45% of forest cover can enhance the sink of emissions, and with additional measures make Nepal a carbon neutral nation. Participation in this declaration reforms Nepal's commitment to the global cause for protecting and restoring our forests that are critical to tackling the climate crisis. Thank you.
Forests matter to me personally. In fact, I make many of my decisions and thinking while walking in the Oslo forest. So not only do we need good policy decisions for forests, we also need forests for good policy decisions. That is why I am pleased to join the Glasgow Leaders' Declaration. Keeping 1.5 degrees alive gives us no choice. We have to halt and reverse global forest loss this decade.
Notre planète fait l'objet de mutations inquiétantes dues aux effets du changement climatique. La République démocratique du Congo, mon pays, avec son massif forestier, ses tourbières, ses ressources en eau et en minerais stratégiques, se présente comme un pays solution à la crise climatique. C'est pourquoi j'appelle les leaders et décideurs du monde entier à agir ensemble, main dans la main, afin que nous préservions ce patrimoine naturel essentiel à la survie de l'humanité.
Australia is the only nation in the world with a continent all to ourselves. There's a vastness and a wonder about our land, from wide dry open plains to the lush rainforests. The landscape and its beauty is part of who we are as a people, as it has been for our Indigenous Australians for thousands of years. Forests matter to Australia and Australians. They are sources of life as well as livelihoods here and around the world. So we must care for them and we must sustain them. By supporting this declaration today in Glasgow, Australia commits to working collectively to ensure there is no net loss of forests around the world. I understand the different circumstances we all face, but I want to affirm today that Australia is committed to reducing deforestation. Our forests are part of our pact with future generations, and we'll lead by example through our cooperative international work program. We will work with partners to combat illegal logging and promote the sustainable use of forests. Our forests and forest products can play a vital role in meeting our global climate challenges through the carbon they capture and store. And they matter to all of us as individuals too. Indeed, Sir David Attenborough puts it, when humankind as a whole is in a position to give back to nature as much as we take and repay some of our debt, well, we'll be able to lead more balanced lives. So Australia is pleased to join this global effort to promote the sustainable management of forests.
Forests matter to Austria because they are an essential part of Austria's biodiversity, our history, of our sense of home, in German, Heimat. Almost half of the surface of Austria is covered by forests. They have formed our landscape over centuries. They provide protection from avalanches in alpine regions. They give home and shelter to some of the most precious species we have in Europe: lynx, wolf, bear, etc. Forests are indispensable for our well-being and our future. Let's work on keeping it that way.
En el marco de esta conferencia de las Naciones Unidas sobre el cambio climático del 2021, en la que hemos sido invitados a unirnos a la Declaración de Bosques y Uso de la Tierra, quiero destacar que Uruguay otorga una gran importancia a los bosques, porque son fundamentales para la vida en la tierra, capturan carbono, conservan la biodiversidad, proveen sombra y abrigo, alimentos y medicinas. Son esenciales para nuestras costas, para la producción agropecuaria, para la calidad del agua y de nuestros suelos. Nuestros bosques nativos constituyen tanto a la adaptación necesaria para hacer frente al cambio climático como a la reducción de emisiones de gases de efecto invernadero, en consonancia con los objetivos del Acuerdo de París. Es por ello que Uruguay se compromete a continuar una gestión forestal que promueva a la protección, conservación, restauración y manejo sostenible de sus bosques nativos.
Forests matter to me because they give life and beauty to our planet and people. They provide air, water, food, shelter, energy, jobs, but also joy, peace of mind, and inspiration. They are our lungs. They are the home of diversity. We need to keep the 1.5 degrees goal within reach, and we know this can only be done by halting and reversing deforestation. Belgium will spare no efforts and will continue to increase its climate finance and invest it in actions for forests, particularly with our friends and partners in Africa.
Protecting the forest matters. It matters to Chile, and it matters to the whole world. The forests matter because they are one of the most important carbon sinks that we have at our disposal. And we need them today more than ever. That's why in Chile, we have nearly 21% of our territory under some form of protection.
Ladies and gentlemen, our next session will commence shortly with an opening by His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I introduce to you His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales. Someone who needs no introduction, as this is the man that put forests and nature on the map, not only in this country, but across the globe. Your Royal Highness, we are so happy to have you here.
Thank you very much, Sandrine. I must say, I'm very touched by your introduction, having known you for a very long time. Yes. So thank you. And Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it was a great pleasure to, I think, see at least some of you at the reception in Kelvin Grove Art Gallery yesterday evening, and now to be able to address you briefly at today's World Leaders Action on Forests and Land Use event. This second session of the Action on Forests and Land Use event is absolutely vital, and I hope I don't need to tell you this, because it is here that we will explore together the scale of the systemic shifts that need to happen really urgently if the world is to succeed in delivering a positive future for nature and people alike. And I mean urgently, as so many people and communities are already suffering seriously from the increasingly dire impacts of climate change. We also have to act before the hydrological cycle breaks down altogether. Now that we know what the problem is, and having done our best to test the world to destruction in the meantime, we simply must talk about the solutions and the actions we can start making and start taking today. The first action I would suggest is to re-engineer the world's financial and economic system to disincentivize deforestation and reward countries and communities for the protection of their forests and the pursuit of a forest-positive economy. We will hear from leaders in the financial sector with ambitious plans to achieve this goal. After all, if we are to restore the critical balance between people and planet, we need to protect, restore, and invest in nature. Investment in natural capital, including fostering more species-rich systems rather than sterile monocultures, can support productive and resilient agriculture, forestry, and aquaculture, while avoiding the pitfalls of climate change, land degradation, resource depletion, pollution, and insect decline. Here, the 30 by 30 biodiversity target is truly critical. To support that objective, I helped to establish something called the Natural Capital Investment Alliance as part of my Sustainable Markets Initiative in order to help develop natural capital as an investment theme and as a means of mobilizing the world's financing and investment communities. But I believe you'll be discussing the details behind the NCIA after I have left here. The second action the world needs as a real matter of priority and justice is to safeguard and honor the rights of indigenous peoples and local communities who depend on the forests for their lives and livelihoods, and who are themselves wise and experienced custodians. In fact, I'm wearing what I've been given earlier when I met them, and this one comes from Ecuador. The virtuous circle of nature is something the world's indigenous peoples hold sacred and understand only too well, and is why we should listen to and learn from their profound intuitive wisdom. By contrast, we seem to have lost that vital sixth sense which should have prevented us from abusing nature in the first place. Today, though, we will hear from forest leaders and donors committed to fulfilling this promise. We thank those leaders for their bravery, their courage, and their commitment to protect their forests and the rich biodiversity that exists within them, despite all the dangers and obstacles placed in their way. The third important action we need to take is the implementation of an accelerated and serious global shift in how we produce and consume goods, decoupling this production and consumption from further loss of forests and other vital ecosystems. I'm therefore delighted we will be joined by leaders committed to shifting to new and more sustainable practices in this area. There is every hope that we can build a more circular, resilient economy, which is better for people as well as for the forests on which we all depend. After all, nature is estimated to contribute some $125 trillion to the global economy annually, if you can ever actually put a real value on it. And everything we use, produce, and purchase ultimately has been created from nature's inputs. In a circular bioeconomy, this requires taking a system-led view of global value chains. The shift to renewable bio-based solutions is therefore an opportunity to rethink industries so that they become nature positive and climate neutral, while providing new jobs and more inclusive prosperity. All these measures would shift our economy onto a more sustainable trajectory. And there are now signs that there is, at last, growing interest in investing in these solutions across both public and private sectors. However, if we want to see tangible and rapid results on the ground, and I'm afraid I do after years of frustrated effort, then we need to articulate and demonstrate the immediate and long-term value of these investments. This is why I established the Circular Bioeconomy Alliance last year to connect the dots between investors and local communities in order to create regenerative and inclusive landscapes and sustainable value chains that work for nature and people. Frankly, we've all had enough talking, so we need to put our words and commitments into practice. This is why, while I speak, the Circular Bioeconomy Alliance is working with local communities in 4 continents to restore thousands of hectares in more than 10 countries to deliver practical solutions through initially what we are calling living laboratories. By doing so, we will, I hope, inspire an entire generation of humanity who will be equipped to make the changes we so desperately need. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and I cannot believe how many times I've ended speeches like this all over the world during the past 40 years and to no avail, but I can only pray that this time, this session will provide us with a real sense of the seriously urgent systemic shifts that need to happen to deliver on our vision. And I urge you all to take forward the work we discussed today with implacable resolve and determination to make things happen on the ground. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much. We'll go back out that way. Yes. Once again, the wise words of His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales. Not only is he a force of nature, but he is one of our greatest forces for nature. I would like to now bring forward the next panel that will very much open up this session to talk about the global financial system and the way in which we truly do activate this declaration in terms of capital and financial flows. Mary Shapiro, co-chair of the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosure, who will moderate this session. Mary, please join me. Jennifer Morris, President and CEO of the Nature Conservancy. Dame Elizabeth Corley, Chair-Designate of Shorters. Fernanda Melpo, CEO of Duagro. Sakir Nusebe, International CEO of Federated Hermes. Frank Elderson, Chair of the Network of the Greening the Financial System, welcome. And the President of Finland, Sauli Niinisto, welcome. And I will now allow for Mary to chair this session. Thank you.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to join you here today. This conference could be pivotal in the fight against climate change, and it will be if we turn ambition into action. I hope this climate summit marks a moment where we put forests at the center of our efforts to tackle the twin crises of climate change and biodiversity loss. For Finland, this topic is particularly close to heart. 75% of our area is covered with forests. In many ways, forests are our lifeline. They have been fundamental to our economic and social development and are perhaps one of the reasons Finland is the happiest country in the world. Moreover, forests play a big role in achieving our target of climate neutrality in 2035. As our society has changed, the forest economy has moved from timber to value-added wood products. Latest innovations include wood fibers that can replace cotton in textile production. Also, in construction and packaging, wood-based products offer sustainable alternatives. Finland's forest resources are continuously growing. The annual increment of forests has more than doubled since the 1950s. Every year, 150 million trees are planted in Finland. During a decade, that means more than 1 billion. In the EU, the aim is to double the amount of trees grown annually from 300 million to 600 million. Our example shows that it is possible to benefit from our forests economically while also increasing their positive climate impact. In many ways, forests are a good investment. We continue to invest in our forests. Currently, we are running a €96 million program to investigate and pilot climate mitigation and adaptation measures in the land use sector. We also cooperate with numerous countries on how to use forests for the benefit of both the economy and climate. Most recently, I discussed the topic with President Putin. At a global level, Finnfund, a Finnish impact investor, is investing in sustainable forestry in developing countries. Finnfund is the first development financing institution with net emission negative investment portfolio based on a large share of forestry in the portfolio. Ladies and gentlemen, delivering a transition towards a forest-positive global economy is not an easy task, but Finland's example shows that it is possible. We stand ready to share our expertise. This topic warrants the attention of world leaders. It is always worthwhile to invest in forests. Thank you.
Sir. I'm sorry. Much better. Your Excellency, thank you so much for your words, which have given us a very powerful framing for our conversation. Before we turn to our panel, we have a very brief film to share.
The trading floors of the major stock exchanges and the forest floors may seem worlds apart, but decisions made by investors have consequences that ripple around the globe. They can be a powerful force in helping to protect and restore our forests and limit global warming to within 1.5 degrees.
The financial sector is, of course, at the heart of the entire energy and land use sector transition for the simple reason, whatever gets financed gets built, or whatever gets financed gets grown.
This last year has shown what's possible with trillions of dollars of net zero commitments from financial institutions. But we mustn't stop there.
Agriculture is the biggest driver of tropical deforestation. Financial institutions provide the trillions of dollars of finance needed throughout agricultural supply chains to enable the production, trade, and use of commodities around the world. How this finance flows is critical to the future of forests and to communities.
So just like we have to take carbon out of the energy sector, we have to take deforestation out of the food system.
So what is the international financial system doing to tackle forest loss and degradation?
One of the key priorities is to ensure that financial institutions fully understand the land use sector is part and parcel of climate risk.
By 2050, nearly 40% of cropland could be exposed to severe drought, leading to large declines in yields. This poses a risk to food security and ultimately to investors. There are also legal and policy risks. Secondly, financial institutions are already taking decisions to manage risk and align their portfolios to support a nature-positive economy.
We need to make sure that they are managing climate and biodiversity risks, including risks associated with deforestation. But we also want to make sure that our investments, our insurance underwriting practices, do not add extra pressures.
Finally, there are hundreds of trillions of dollars of global capital that could be further mobilized towards a net zero, nature-positive economy. These investments could boost productivity, create new jobs, and secure incomes for millions of people worldwide.
O nosso propósito maior, produzir alimentos de uma forma sustentável, socialmente correta.
Moving forward, we will need a better understanding of the value of nature's services to help inform financial and economic decision-making.
Financial institutions will also need the right tools and data to analyze and manage risk in the sector, but also bolster and seize opportunities to invest in forest-positive economies.
As policies create the enabling conditions for sustainable finance, so the opportunities and incentives to scale investment in the green economy will grow.
E eu acho que a parceria maior está junto às grandes empresas, que consomem, também fazer o diferencial. Vir buscar a história, a rastreabilidade dos produtos produzidos e de que forma eles estão sendo produzidos.
The business case is clear.
Now is the time for action. Now is the time for those watching this to be the necessary heroes of today and lead the world into a deforestation-free financial sector.
So let's get to work.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is a privilege to be with you all today and to be part of this event at an important turning point for our planet. As we have heard, the science is clear. We cannot stay within 1.5 degrees without serious and urgent action, including through protecting the world's forests. And as the Glasgow Declaration on Forests and Land Use makes clear, In order to protect and restore the world's forests, we must realign private financial flows to catalyze a forest-positive future. There is no doubt this will be challenging, but my role as head of the Secretariat for the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures has reaffirmed my conviction that capital markets can and must work in the interests of people and the planet. It has also made me optimistic that the changes required to guard and restore the world's natural systems upon which we all depend can happen and quickly. And disclosure is the first step to making this possible. Through transparency into the financial impacts of climate change, markets can allocate capital to businesses that prioritize resilience and sustainability. 5 years ago, few would have believed that disclosing climate risks would be mainstream across global financial systems, and that 9 jurisdictions would be on track to enforce TCFD-aligned climate reporting requirements. But they have. To date, much of our thinking about the transition to net zero has focused on defining transition pathways for the energy and transport sectors, and for good reason, as these sectors are critical to achieving transition. But we must expand our horizon and pay more attention to the agriculture, forest, and land use sector, which accounts for 23% of greenhouse gas emissions. This is a big number. Within the TCFD, we understand the importance of this sector, which is why we now strongly encourage that Scope 3 emissions, such as those from agriculture, forestry, and land use, be publicly disclosed. In support of this, we appreciate that colleagues at the World Business Council on Sustainable Development will develop new guidance on business-relevant scenarios for companies that work with the land system to ensure that we can better understand the risks that emissions from this vital sector pose, and to help companies identify emission reduction opportunities across their portfolio. And we are not alone. Today I'm joined by a brilliant panel of speakers, each of whom is applying the broader principles of managing climate risk to the challenge of reversing forest loss and degradation and supporting the transition to sustainable land use. What we will hear is that the system, the rules that underpin the financial sector are changing to support the transition to a net zero, nature-positive future. Financial institutions are committing to align their portfolios with global efforts to tackle forest loss as part of their wider transition to net zero. And that many are now taking advantage of this transition and the opportunity it brings to scale investment in sustainable business models, to rebuild our natural capital, including forests, and to ensure we have a resilient, climate-smart food system. So firstly, we will hear from an extraordinary and innovative leader, Mr. Frank Elderson, Chair of the Network for Greening the Financial System. Frank, can you tell us about the NGFS? How does it help to work to help deliver real-world outcomes, such as protecting and restoring the world's forests?
Thank you, Mary, dear delegates, dear guests. The challenges addressed here today are of vital importance to the Central Banks and Supervisors Network for Greening the Financial System, the NGFS. Since its foundation in 2017, the NGFS has grown with a lightning speed from 8 to almost 100 members today. And our membership encompasses central banks and supervisors from developing, emerging, and developed economies, covering 5 continents, ranging from the biggest economies to the smallest island states. None immune from storms, fires, floods, and deforestation. The bad news is that until but a few years ago, climate change and environmental degradation were all but blind spots for the financial sector. But the good news is that this is so no longer. The work of the NGFS has decisively contributed to the insight that climate and environmental risks are a source of financial risks, bringing them squarely within the mandates of central banks and supervisors, and to understanding that the financial sector needs to be part of the solution of the ongoing climate and environmental crises. With our large and committed membership, our leverage on the financial sector can hardly be overestimated. Together, we supervise all globally systemically relevant banks and over 2/3 of systemically relevant insurers. Together, we cover 88% of the global economy and 85% of all global emissions. At the NGFS, we have been working hard over the last 4 years to integrate climate-related and environmental risks into the work of central banks and supervisors. We published a guide recommending supervisors to clarify their expectations that banks and insurers should revisit their very DNA to address climate-related and environmental risks. In addition, the NGFS has developed forward-looking scenarios, identified data gaps, and assessed how climate change is relevant for monetary policy. Through all these activities, light has been shown on the relevance of climate change for the financial sector, concrete tools have been developed, and significant progress has been made. However, forests, and more broadly nature, have so far remained too much in the shadow. And that is why, recognizing the harm that nature-blind financial flows may cause, and that climate change and environmental degradations are very much related. That is why, last month, the NGFS published a study on biodiversity and financial stability. We and the financial institutions that we supervise need to become at least as expeditious on nature-related risks as we are on climate. Reaching net zero and saving nature requires the right combination of urgent, concrete and decisive governmental policies and a financial system aligning itself with these policies, both in terms of grasping the related opportunities and managing the related risks. Our network will continue to wield its leverage to green the financial system. For although finance alone cannot make the world green, greening the world without it is impossible. Forest and finance are more intricately intertwined than ever, and only together they can thrive.
Thank you. That was terrific, and I think we all understand that central bankers can be among the most powerful actors in this space, so thank you. Saker, Hermes has responded to the UN High-Level Champion's call to action and has committed to strengthen its efforts to tackle deforestation in your portfolio. Tell us more about why you did this and what it will mean practically speaking.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me here. And some 30 years ago, some trade unions from this great city and some city folk got together in what became the original company. And they originally wanted to invest because they wanted to be good in their investment, because they understood that the purpose of investing the money of the pensioners and the savers is to build a better world. And over the years, it's turned out that actually investing sustainably is financially better. Now, this was not accepted 5-8 years ago, but it's much more accepted today. If you look at the future that we hold, the future of our savers, the future of the people who are in the investment system, at 2.7 degrees, which is the trajectory we are at now, unless we do something, there is no future. The future is bleak. There is a possibility even of system collapse. So what do we need to do about it? Yes, we do need to ensure that on the carbon track we reduce carbon. We have signed up to net zero in our own portfolios by 2050. But that's not enough. It's got to be deeper. And you've got to look at the forests as well. Why? Because forests provide two crucial things. The first one is forests are carbon sinks. But that is not all. Forests are the source of biodiversity. And if you listen to the work of the scientists in the Natural History Museum in London, you would be terrified, because the rate at which we're destroying biodiversity on Earth is actually bringing us to clear and present danger. It is therefore incumbent on all of us to save the future, including financial returns, by actually investing in a way that allows us to reduce commodity deforestation and allows us to reduce carbon. So what are we doing about it? I sit here today as representing one of 30 firms that represent in total $8.7 trillion of assets under management, including Schroders, that Dame Elizabeth also sits here representing. And we have undertaken to try to eliminate from our portfolios by 2025 commodity-driven deforestation. Now, we're not talking about exclusion, we're talking about stewardship and active management, and that is key. And I'd like to thank the PRI for its leadership in this and helping us within that and getting us to where we are today. The second thing that I'd like to thank, actually we just heard His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales. We're also part and proud to be signatories to his Natural Capital Investment Alliance, which is also driving into the same effect. I've got 40 seconds, and here is the 40 seconds worth. We have proven through 30 years of history that investing sustainably is better for the investors financially as well as better for the planet. We are sitting here today as a nation of peoples from around the world, as one family of nations. We know that the future is in our hands. As our own Queen, Her Majesty said, we've got to do this for our children. So I'm calling all of those in the investment sector. Let us do our job correctly. Let us invest sustainably. Let us support this effort to stop the deforestation. Let us support net zero, and let's try to build a better future for our children. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The transition to a low-carbon economy brings big opportunities globally, including for this sector. Fernanda, can you tell us more about the work you are doing in the Amazon and more broadly?
Thank you, Mary. It's a real privilege to be here today. I want to thank the COP presidency for the invitation. The conservation of nature is essential for the survival of our society. At the same time, we face a growing world population and an increasing demand for food. The Amazon and Cerrado region in Brazil and Chaco region in Paraguay and Argentina are both key areas for preservation of nature and food production, therefore central to the climate change discussion. As founder and CEO of Doagro, a financial fintech that finances growers in the ground, the small and medium growers, I'm proud to announce today the launch of IFEC, Innovative Finance for Amazon, Cerrado, and Chaco, an initiative led by TNC, TFA, and UNEP. We currently are a coalition of 8 signatories: Doagro, Verti, JGP, Grupo Gaia, Agri3, Sustainable Investment Management, and Green Fund, and Syngenta. Collectively, we have already committed $3 billion to accelerate soy and cattle production that is free of deforestation and land conversion in South America. However, to scale the transformation of food production in these biomes, we have 2 main challenges. First, it requires a large upfront investment that governments alone cannot finance. Therefore, private capital plays an essential role. Secondly, the cost and the risk are global, so they cannot fall only upon the producers on the ground. We need governments to create enabling conditions and the private sector to offer the right incentives. With this, we can make producers confident to change the existing business model and therefore enable this urgent transformation in the sector. IFEC was created to promote and support this transition through innovation and help to address challenges we face. In light of such a large task and much needed cause, I would like to call upon all agribusiness stakeholders and the financial community to join us in IFEC. We all have an important role to play, and together we can and will advance the change. Thank you.
Thank you. Elizabeth, can you tell us about how Schroders is working with other financial institutions to scale investment in natural capital, including forests?
Yes, thanks, Mary. And it's a real pleasure to be on such a distinguished panel of committed people and to be in a room of people who are also committed to saving the forests and improving the land use in the world. I'm delighted to say that Schroders is one of the signatories of the deforestation-free finance commitment, and we're very proud to be. We're also proud to have signed up to the Natural Capital Investment Alliance, and we'll also be joining the Forest Investor Club. 3 organisations committed, absolutely committed, to making sure that private capital flows for good in preventing deforestation and reclaiming land for proper use. We have an ambition to do this in a way that is very close to the Schroeder's philosophy of thinking about the environment, about society, and in this case we're talking about Indigenous and other communities, and thinking about the impact of the way in which investment monies flow. Those three things come together absolutely in the way in which we think about investing in natural capital. And I think everybody here accepts that we will not reach a net zero world unless we can invest properly for nature. It's difficult though. The reason we have these alliances is that the demand that we're hearing from our clients, from asset owners, from individuals in their savings to do the right thing with their money, it's hard to find the projects. And when we find the projects, it's hard to make sure the money reaches the right places, and then that we can evidence back to our investors that the money is having the right impact. That's why we join alliances. That's why we're committed to making proper impact investing in natural capital part of the future for mainstream finance. There is no doubt we can do this by working together. So it's our ambition to scale this. We have $10 billion already committed from 15 asset managers who are part of the Natural Capital Investment Alliance now. But our money is beyond that 10 billion. It's also to catalyse change, to improve the way in which we can finance projects, to start early-stage innovations, and to help others come in a way that means that we're doing absolutely the right thing for the people and for the planet, while also delivering an important financial return for everybody that saves their money with us. We're thrilled to be part of these alliances and privileged to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Jen, from the perspective of citizens around the world, why is this debate so important?
Thanks so much, Mary. It's wonderful to be here out of our Zoom rooms and actually seeing each other in person. I am so excited to hear about the announcements today. We've heard incredible commitments for the conservation of nature from banks, from companies around the world. But honestly, that's kind of the easy part. The hard part is going to be the next step, actual implementation. How do we make sure that we can get the right finance to the right places in time? So many of you who've been in this field for a while, as I have, may remember the 2014 New York Declaration on Forests. At that time, over 200 signatories signed up to end deforestation in the tropics by 2020. 2020 has come and gone, and not one of those companies was able to fulfill that pledge. So is past prologue? What can we learn from those experiences? What's different today? One thing that's very different is the TCFD. And I want to salute the member companies that have signed up to this incredibly important thing, because it's not just voluntary. It is now, but we're looking to see that it actually becomes mandatory in major markets where trillions of dollars of capital will be looking at the risk that they have in their portfolios as a direct result of climate change. So that's different. We're moving climate risk from ESG and CSR to actually DNA of companies. But the second really key part is, how do we get financing down to where it matters? That was one of the biggest lessons from the New York Declaration on Forests. And I love to hear about what some of the efforts that are happening. But there's really three things that we're seeing that's missing, that we need to make sure that financial institutions have on the ground. That's increased transparency, so we know where the money is flowing, so we not only name and shame companies, but we actually can recognize and support their efforts to end deforestation in their supply chains. The second thing is, farmers need patient, appropriate capital. We have to understand deeply these supply chains and provide farmers with access to money that they need that fits with their production cycles. These are critical elements. And finally, the KISS principle. Keep it simple. Sometimes these loan applications are just too much for farmers, so they end up borrowing from money lenders at very egregious rates. If we don't fix the financial problem, we cannot save our forests. And I know none of us in this room want to have the legacy of not achieving and implementing on these commitments. It's for all of us, it's for our future and our children's future. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. And thank you for your kind words about TCFD. I want to thank all of you for your brilliant contributions. And listening to you, I'm really struck by how much already is happening. We already have many tools we need to understand, manage, and mitigate climate risk, particularly in agriculture, forest, and land use, as part of the broader transition to the net zero economy. We see a strong commitment to act from the financial sector itself, developing and publishing scientifically grounded policies and milestones to guide the transition to forest-positive portfolios. Today, we have seen more than 30 major financial institutions with nearly $7 trillion of assets under management send a really significant signal that private finance fully grasps its role in tackling the challenge of forest loss and degradation. And finally, we have seen financial institutions coming together with business, development finance institutions, and the multilateral development banks, mobilizing billions of dollars and developing the tools needed to scale investment in a more sustainable, forest-positive future. But today needs to be just the beginning, not the end of this journey. I hope that 5 years from now, the agriculture and land use sector will be at the heart of our policy on managing climate risk. The tackling deforestation risk will be a routine part of financial institutions' policies and practice. And most importantly, investment in sustainable food and agriculture and the bioeconomy will have scaled beyond our current imagining. This future is possible. Together, we can make it a reality. Thank you all for your time today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mary. And thank you to the whole panel. Very much appreciate your commitment. Ladies and gentlemen, I would now like to introduce, as we now shift into the next session, the Prime Minister of Norway, Jonas Gahr Støre. Prime Minister, please come to the lectern.
Thank you, Madam President, Your Royal Highness, Presidents and Prime Ministers, ladies and gentlemen. There is progress being made at this COP. We can feel that after this session and the attention being given to this critical theme. We need to address the twin crisis of climate change and nature loss at the same time, and I believe we can find solutions to both. For my government, climate and environmental considerations will be at the core of all policy areas in our government undertakings. We cannot solve the climate crisis without stopping tropical deforestation. So there's a win-win here that we need to grasp. Deforestation leads to climate change, nature loss and human suffering. Reducing deforestation is no easy task. But it will have, and it may have, a triple positive effect for people, for the climate, and for nature. So addressing deforestation requires tough decisions to regulate land use and enforce legislation. We need a just rural transition that benefits people. And that change needs to be socially equitable. We are mobilizing finance to support governments, indigenous peoples and local communities in protecting forests. I am encouraged by the progress being made by many tropical forest countries. I was in government 15 years ago when many of these initiatives started, and they have come afar when we now enter the 2020s. I'm pleased to see new partnerships forming to support forest countries in their further efforts. The joint public finance pledge we are making today is in fact unprecedented. But perhaps even more exciting is the LEAF Coalition's breakthrough in mobilizing private finance. Some of the world's largest companies stand ready to reward tropical forest countries that reduce deforestation. These companies are doing this voluntarily, in addition to making deep cuts in their own emissions. Another win-win. And this is, as we know it in the Nordic region, public-private collaboration at its best. With our partners, Norway is making high-resolution satellite imagery available to everyone, anywhere, and for free. This improves policy-making and helps to hold companies accountable. And it empowers indigenous peoples and local communities. It strengthens the position of environmental defenders who risk their lives for the sake of forests. I am encouraged by the new commitments from commodity traders to eliminate deforestation from their supply chains. So many of the dots are now being connected, Madam President. I'm glad to see that financial markets are incorporated forest-related financial risks in their investment decisions. This is, in fact, an acknowledgement that climate risk is a financial risk and must be managed as such. We need data and transparency if markets are to reduce pressure on tropical forests. To protect forests, we must empower the people who live in them. This is a matter of social justice. The evidence shows that strengthening the rights of indigenous peoples reduces deforestation. And only a fraction of indigenous communities have secure tenure rights. This has to change with the other changes we are encouraging. I commend, let me do that at this occasion, the leadership shown by Costa Rica and other countries. I have listened with interest to the vision presented by indigenous leaders here today, on stage and backstage, and Norway is fully committed to supporting their efforts. I'm honored to announce a collective pledge of $1.7 billion to strengthen the rights of indigenous peoples. The donor group behind this pledge is seeking to reinforce your role as guardians of forests and nature. We will support national land and forest tenure reform processes, and we will support indigenous governance structures and sustainable livelihoods. This is, in fact, a matter of economics, a matter of politics, but deep down it is a matter of ethics. And it is a matter of living up to the objective of this conference, keeping the 1.5 degrees vision alive. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Prime Minister, and for opening this session up so well. Again, Norway's commitment not only to forests, but also to the people that depend on our forests and protect our forests. Ahead of the next session, which will be speaking about the role of Indigenous people and communities, we would like to celebrate the role of these people and the role that they play in the world's forests. In this special video, which is titled Voices from the Forest. Another inspirational video. Now we're going to sit down and have a discussion, which I hope you will find just as fascinating as all the other conversations and commitments that we've seen today. We all know the important role of Indigenous people as guardians of the world's forests, and we know that this is more vital than ever. So I would like to ask Tuntiak Katan, Vice Coordinator of Indigenous Organizations of the Amazon River Basin and General Coordinator of the Global Alliance of Territorial Communities, as our first speaker today. Patrick Hemedi, National Coordinator Dynamique des Groupes des Peuples Autochtones. President of Costa Rica, Carlos Alvarado. Darren Walker, President of the Ford Foundation. And Joan Carling, Global Director of Indigenous Peoples' Rights International. Tuntiak, could I ask you to inspire us, and you may use the lectern, if you would like, which is to your left. Use the lectern, or you can stay where you are, what you prefer.
Mi nombre es Tuntiak Katan, soy hijo del pueblo Shuar de la Amazonía ecuatoriana. Soy vicecoordinador de la COICA y coordinador general de la Alianza Global de Comunidades Territoriales, constituido por AMAN, REPALEC, AMPB, APIP y COICA. Todos juntos, esta Alianza Global de Comunidades Territoriales, tenemos 950 millones de hectáreas de bosques tropicales en el mundo. Ahora vengo a ser la voz de los niños, jóvenes, mujeres, ancianos que están en el territorio, en diferentes partes de los bosques tropicales. A decirles que la ciencia ya está reconociendo que los pueblos indígenas somos los mejores protectores de la selva, de la biodiversidad. Que la ciencia está diciendo que los ecosistemas del mundo están a punto de no retorno. Venimos aquí a decir a Glasgow, a decir a los líderes mundiales de todo el planeta, a los gobernantes. Los pueblos indígenas venimos acá para hacer un pacto de vida, porque ya no hay tiempo. A decirles que no hagan promesas políticas que no van a cumplir, para decirles que no hagan anuncios financieros, climáticos, si no van a trabajar con la gente, con los pueblos indígenas y comunidades locales. Por lo tanto, les pedimos 5 cosas a los líderes mundiales. Intensificar el derecho de los territorios de los pueblos indígenas y comunidades locales. Queremos garantía de vida en nuestros territorios. Queremos el respeto de los líderes, de los voceros indígenas, de los protectores. No nos asesinen, no nos maten. Si los proyectos se van a realizar en el territorio, se hagan mediante consulta y consentimiento, que es lo fundamental. Y les decimos, necesitamos valorar y necesitan valorar y apoyar los conocimientos y la ciencia de los pueblos indígenas. Eso significa reconocer las contribuciones determinadas de los territorios indígenas con sus bosques. Así que venimos con unas propuestas concretas a decir, trabajemos juntos. La decisión que tomemos hoy será la diferencia si vamos a vivir o vamos a perecer todos. Por eso, la propuesta desde la juventud, desde la niñez, desde las mujeres, desde los ancianos, levantamos la voz y decimos, empecemos ya todos juntos. Todos juntos tenemos que subir en esta canoa desde la selva, desde la cuenca del Congo, desde Mesoamérica, que nos tiene que salvar a todos. Por eso, la acción es ahora, hermanos y hermanas. A nombre de todos los pueblos indígenas, de los bosques tropicales, decirles, aquí estamos y vamos a actuar ya. Muchas gracias. Buenas tardes.
Muchas gracias, Toniak. I don't think that there is a louder voice right now in this very important room, calling out for the rights of Indigenous people, calling out for the fact that there is no more time, and for us to translate the incredible words that we have heard this morning and that we will continue to hear during the next 2 weeks into action. Thank you for your call to action and asking us to all get into the canoe together, wherever we may be. I would like to now pass to President Carlos Alvarado Quezada, a president of a country that has shown for much time that protecting nature is absolutely fundamental to the protection not only of your people, but of people across the globe, and also recognized by your recent Earthshot Award. President, as a country rich with forests and a large Indigenous population, why do you see protecting land rights as important?
Thank you, and I want to salute and thank my colleagues here. We need to protect those because of the voice we just heard and voices around the world that are similar. I'd like to share my personal journey in this. When I was a freshman going out of university, I started working in a place by accident called FONAFIFO, which is the National Forestry Fund of Costa Rica. Sorry, I was a journalist, just graduated, but I ended up working there, and they told me, okay, we have this new concept we need to communicate. It's called environmental services. And I asked, what is it, environmental services? They say, okay, forests provide services to communities and humanity. That was more than 20 years ago. And I was like, okay, this is, I thought for 1 second, this is like selling air. This is bluffing. They say, no. Okay, the concept is this. Forests take care of water. They protect water, so they're good for production. That's one service. Forests are home to various species, animals, plants. So you have a protection of biodiversity. At that time, biodiversity was not as valued as today, for example, when we see this great loss of biodiversity. Forests also fix carbon in the fight against climate change, 20 years ago. And they also are good for the economy because they provide ecosystems in which people could have tourism and productive activities. So I started working on that. And as going forward in payment for environmental services, which is now recognized with the Earthshot, one of the areas that was not yet explored was the payment of environmental services for indigenous communities and local communities. Because it is true that the main guardians of forest and land are indigenous communities, because the knowledge
of how to balance the ecosystems and livelihoods, it's not equal. I mean, that concept, those concepts are not present after Industrial Revolution. It's just about production. The other knowledge before that, that knowledge of our indigenous people, it's about sustainability. So that is key. And in Costa Rica, we're using that scheme, and currently payment for environmental services goes to indigenous communities that actually protect those forests. And we get those services with fixed carbon, which we know we need to do now. We protect biodiversity, and that's one of the key elements of how Costa Rica went in 1980s from 20% of forest coverage to currently having more than 50% of forest coverage. That's one of the key traits of how we managed to do that. And also, in terms of biodiversity, when the world has lost about 40% of biomass, of biodiversity, following the trend of the forest, we have recovered approximately 40% of wildlife biomass due to forest protection, and that's how we managed to do that with protection of land and hand in hand with indigenous people. So that's a bit of it, a little bit of my journey, personal journey, but also hand in hand with our country's been doing.
Thank you so much, President. And we know that storytelling is absolutely fundamental, and the importance also of paying environmental services to those that are the stewards of the land. Thank you for that personal journey. Speaking of paying, I would like to turn to the perspective of a philanthropist and to speak to you, Darren, as the president of the Ford Foundation, thinking of new funding mechanisms to channel money to Indigenous peoples and communities. Why is your foundation taking on a major commitment on this issue?
Well, thank you, and I'm so grateful to be on this panel with my esteemed colleagues. Let me say that today is historic for two reasons. It is historic because of the announcement of an unprecedented $1.7 billion raised in a fund specifically earmarked for support for Indigenous peoples and local communities, the first of its kind. Today is also historic because we have seen something unprecedented. Tanteak, you spoke here on the stage of the world leaders. Indigenous peoples have been fighting to get in the room, to get a seat at the table. And today is unprecedented because, yes, we are focused on forests and lands, but we know that without a focus on Indigenous peoples, local communities, Afro-descendants, we will not rise to the challenge. So we have work to do. We have work to ensure that as policy gets made, we center and invest in the leadership, the capacity building, the power of Indigenous leaders, that they no longer will stand outside of the room asking to be allowed in, but that we as donors recognize that without a focus and centering them, there is not going to be a solution to this climate challenge. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Darren. And so true, again, that we must have people at the table from all different Indigenous communities, different genders, and a real diversity so that we can truly solve the complexity of the problems that we have in front of us. Patrick, this donor pledge presents a big acknowledgement from donors of the need to support Indigenous and forest communities. As an Indigenous leader from the DRC region, What is your thinking? Why is this so important to you?
Chers dirigeants mondiaux et décideurs, chers collègues, sœurs et sœurs autochtones, je m'appelle Patrick Saïdi, je viens de la République démocratique du Congo, je suis coordonnateur national de la dynamique des groupes des peuples autochtones. Ici, je représente les organisations autochtones vivant dans la forêt du bassin du Congo, le deuxième plus grand massif tropical forestier au monde. Nous saluons effectivement la mobilisation des fonds internationaux pour sécuriser les droits à la terre des autochtones. Si nous voulons tous renforcer la gestion des territoires forestiers par les autochtones comme une solution efficace aux crises climatiques et de la biodiversité, cette sécurisation des droits à la terre est une condition préalable et fondamentale. Les promesses financières que vous faites et la volonté politique que vous affichez ici à Glasgow doivent maintenant se matérialiser sur le terrain. Des mécanismes efficaces doivent être mis en place pour garantir que les ressources mobilisées atteignent véritablement et prioritairement les communautés autochtones et locales. Mon pays, la RDC, s'est engagé à devenir un leader mondial du climat avec le slogan RDC Pays Solution. Le président Félix Tshisekedi s'est engagé à sécuriser les terres des autochtones et c'est suivant leur volonté et sous leur contrôle. Le Parlement s'apprête à voter une loi spécifique en faveur des peuples autochtones reconnaissant leurs droits à la terre et aux ressources. Ceci est une contribution majeure dans la lutte contre le changement climatique. D'autres pays doivent suivre cet exemple. Nous nous joignons à vous et à nos frères et sœurs des pays forestiers tropicaux pour aider nos gouvernements à entreprendre des initiatives durables qui préserveront nos forêts. Si vous aspirez à un développement durable, il faut sécuriser les droits à la terre des autochtones et leur système de gouvernance pour une protection efficace des forêts. Car sans forêt, nous ne saurons pas faire face au changement climatique et nous ne connaîtrons pas les développements. Merci.
Merci Patrick pour vos mots tellement inspirants. Et maintenant, I would like to turn to Joan. Joan, I want to give you the last word. This commitment is something that Indigenous people and local forest communities have been asking for a long time. What do you think is most critical with regard to this pledge, and how can we truly have it change things on the ground, as we've been asked also by Tantiak and many others, to ensure that this becomes not just words, but true actions?
Thank you for that. We welcome today's global commitment to strengthen the forest tenure of Indigenous peoples and local communities. Should this investment lead to appropriate policies and investments, this will certainly make profound changes on the ground. We expect this commitment to ensure forest tenure and conservation of at least 500 million hectares of forest managed by Indigenous peoples and local communities. We should also support actions to protect boreal forests. As guardians of the forest, we look forward to a new partnership based on respect, solidarity, and cooperation expressed in concrete policy actions and investments that will protect our rights and enhance our reciprocal and interdependent relationship with nature, and will thereby propel the conservation of forests and ecosystems, not only for us, but for all humanity. We need to ensure that this commitment is fully aligned to broader policies and actions to combat climate change. We call for policy coherence and strong implementation of states and other actors to deliver on their commitments and obligations to reduce carbon emissions, reduce and halt deforestation, while fully respecting the rights of Indigenous peoples and local communities. These actions are imperative to save the planet now. Indigenous peoples' conservation of forests is very evident. Yet each day, we are losing our forests and we are being persecuted due to powerful and vested interest and the lack of political will. We urgently need you, the world leaders today, to act now to stop this devastation and criminalization. Finally, we urge you to build with us today the transformational partnerships that begin with the respect for our rights. With nature reaching a tipping point, your collective actions now to save the world's forest and biodiversity will determine our future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joan. Thank you also for the reminder of solidarity and mutual respect for Indigenous rights and the importance, again, that we must listen and protect Indigenous people. I know as well, and our thoughts go to many of the most vulnerable Indigenous people who have lost their lives during the COVID pandemic. I would like to thank the panel for the depth of your storytelling and your commitments and your call to action. And may I ask you now to get up and move towards the left and exit. Thank you very much. As always, we can get inspired by the sounds of nature. Ladies and gentlemen, it's truly a pleasure to introduce the next panel. Here we are going to speak about sustainable consumption and production, and as some of you know, as co-president of the Club of Rome, consumption is absolutely essential for all of us who have been speaking about the need to shift our consumption and production patterns. So it is my great pleasure to introduce to you three very prominent leaders within this field. The President of Ghana, Nana Akufo-Addo, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, Director General of the World Trade Organization, and Børge Brende from the World Economic Forum as CEO will be obviously giving us the importance of what the private sector can do in terms of shifting our economies. So thank you, and Ngozi, you will be facilitating this session.
Yes.
So you are wanting to come to the lectern, please do.
Okay. Thank you so much. Well, thank you so much for that. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me make 3 key points before I hand over to the panel. The first point I'd like to make about trade and forest and land use is that trade can and must make a positive contribution to halting deforestation and supporting more sustainable markets for forest and farm goods as part of a comprehensive and ambitious climate action agenda. Forests are critical for biodiversity conservation, carbon sequestration, and the maintenance of ecosystems. But the proportion of forest area fell dramatically between 2000 to 2020, resulting in a net loss of 100 million hectares of the world's forests. Policies affecting trade and markets must advance multiple goals, including safeguarding biodiversity, supporting climate action, promoting food security, creating jobs and raising incomes, and supporting viable, dynamic, and competitive markets. Passing and implementing robust environmental legislation can ensure that forest products and agricultural goods reflect their true costs when these products are traded on domestic or international markets. This can enable trade to play a positive role in contributing to mitigation and adaptation efforts as part of a comprehensive and ambitious climate action agenda. My second point is that governments can help tackle deforestation by reforming subsidies that create perverse incentives on global markets. Governments can help support more sustainable, equitable, and efficient global markets by reforming subsidies that create perverse incentives for market actors, including in areas such as fossil fuels, agriculture, and fisheries. Doing so would improve the allocation of scarce global resources, as well as contributing to the competitiveness, sustainability, and resilience of communities in both rural and urban areas. My third point is that trade has an essential role to play in the just and inclusive food system transformation that we need. As rising incomes, demographic change, and evolving diets continue to shape markets for food and agriculture, trade has an important role to play in enabling food producers to respond to rising demand without exacerbating pressure on forests, other carbon sinks, and other biodiversity-rich ecosystems. Digital trade and services can also contribute directly to improving sustainable forest management and land use by expanding access to technologies that can support conservation and monitoring efforts. It is important in this process of promoting sustainable and deforestation-free value chains to adopt a positive and collaborative approach through non-discriminatory, comprehensive, and ambitious policies that help ensure a just and inclusive transition. As the UK and Indonesian governments pointed out, this could lead to markets worth up to $5 trillion a year in trade by 2030 for the millions of people who already rely on agriculture and forestry for their livelihoods. But it's not only governments that have to act. The private sector, including the world commodity traders, must play a role. I therefore welcome the FACT Dialogue Roadmap announced today by the UK's Prime Minister Boris Johnson and Indonesia as an opportunity to deepen understanding and to build trust, partnership, and collaboration around action. So now, without further ado, let me turn to our first speaker, His Excellency President Nana Akufo-Addo of Ghana, a dynamic, progressive leader who is determined to show that cocoa can be produced sustainably. Your Excellency, please.
Our excellent moderator, Excellencies, I thank the British Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Boris Johnson, for the invitation to be part of this event, which is raising awareness about the importance of preserving our forests and winning the fight against climate change. In Ghana today, deforestation and forest degradation are the greatest challenges to sustainable forest management. The consequential effect of deforestation and forest degradation has proved to be severe climate change, which has dire consequences for our livelihoods, specifically the drying up of our water bodies, the pollution of our waters, loss of our prime timber species, loss of biodiversity, and change in rainfall patterns and weather conditions in the country. We realize that there is an urgent need to reverse the trend and restore our forest resources as much as possible back to their original state. We do not have tomorrow or the day after tomorrow to do this, and that is why we're acting now. Ghana has, in the course of the last 2 decades, adopted several policies and programs aimed at restoring our forest. Between 2002 and 2020, under the National Forest Plantation Development Program and the Ghana Forest Plantation Strategy, some 580,000 hectares of plantations have been established. Again, through the Youth in Afforestation Program, we're committed to reclaiming some 7.6 million hectares of degraded forest and farmlands. In June this year, I led the entire country through the Green Ghana project to plant over 7 million trees, far above the 5 million we had targeted. Next year, we aim to plant a minimum of 20 million trees, and we have already begun earnest preparations towards this. We're doing all of this because we want to deepen in Ghana the culture of planting trees and thereby reduce deforestation and greenhouse gas emissions from land use changes and secure a sustainable future for present and successive generations of Ghanaians, premised on a healthy environment. Ghana is committed to the Forest Agriculture Commodity Trade FACT dialogue process, and she affirms her resolve to support the development and implementation of the FACT roadmap actions. We're determined to operationalize the timber legality assurance system as part of the forest law enforcement governance and trade process, which will enable us track wood electronically to ensure that only legally compliant timber is allowed into any market. From 2024 and beyond, we aim to reduce emissions by some 10 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent in the cocoa forest landscape through the implementation of the Ghana Cocoa Forest Red Plus program, one of 5 ecological landscape tailored programs in Ghana's Red Plus strategy. Ghana, through her nationally determined contributions in the forest sector, is committed to supporting the global target of halving emissions by 2030 and attaining neutrality by 2050. Undoubtedly, and with the right partnerships, these goals are well within our reach and will help fight for the protection of our planet from climate change. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much. And Ngozi, I apologize for interrupting, but we have a very special guest here with us who's been able to make it. And that is the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. She has asked if she could speak, and then we will turn to you, my friend. So I apologize, but due to timing issues, I would like to bring in the President, if I may. Thank you.
Please. Thank you very much, Madam President. Dear Dr. Ngozi, dear President Nana Akufo-Addo, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for stressing the importance of working with producer countries like, for example, Ghana. Indeed, protecting forests, sustainably managing them, and caring for the land is our shared priority. Not only because these ecosystems are essential for the stability of our climate, but also because they continue to provide livelihoods for hundreds of millions of people right around the world. And we know that in many forest communities around the world, tradition, culture, craftsmanship are very alive, and therefore protecting forests is also about protecting our heritage. And we need to better listen to the indigenous communities, to the producers, to the consumers, and to the traders. Listen to each other, work with each other. And in this principle, we have since long been working in partnership with producing countries to reduce pressure on forests. We redirect finances in support of more sustainable land use now. And we have made forest protection an integral part of our relations with trading partners. And let me give you some examples. We have the Green Alliance with Japan. We have an environment and climate dialogue with China. But we also know how important it is to play our part at home. We have to reduce the EU's consumption footprint on land and forest around the world. European voters and consumers are making this increasingly clear to us. They no longer want to buy products that are responsible for deforestation or forest degradation. And this is why we will soon propose a regulation to tackle EU-driven global deforestation. Commodities and products placed on our market should not lead to deforestation. But we will do that with a principle to working in close partnership with the producing countries. This is so important. As I've said, listen to each other, work with each other to stop deforestation. Working in partnership is essential. And it is in that context that I am pleased to announce that the Commission will provide €1 billion to the Global Forest Pledge. And we are very happy that 250 million of these will be specifically for the Congo Basin Pledge, so important too. And of course, I'm very pleased to sign up to the declaration for the EU, along with the joint statement on a roadmap for action on forest, agriculture, and commodity trade. Europe is delighted to be part of this ambitious movement to protect our climate, to protect our heritage, and to protect our forests. Thank you for your attention. Thanks a lot.
Well, thank you very much, Madam President. We're really glad you came on for those inspiring examples and for the pledge. But I also want to thank His Excellency, President Akufo-Addo, for the ambitious goals he's also set of planting 20 million trees and saving 10 million tons of CO2 in the cocoa areas. So thank you both, very, very wonderful pledges for us to hear. Now, let me also bring in the private sector. I'd like to call on President Bjørge Brende, the President of the World Economic Forum, to give us a private sector perspective. And I understand you also have a very important announcement to make. Bjørge.
So thank you for the opportunity to be here, and thank you to the European Commission for the pledge of 1 billion, very consequential. Thank you, Dr. Ngozi. We'll have a very interesting dialogue now, the two of us. As you heard, the World Economic Forum, on behalf of the forum, I'm representing 10 major agricultural processing and trading businesses who have committed to accelerate climate action in their supply chains today, really walking the talk. Firstly, I would like also to thank COP and also Prime Minister Johnson for his commitment at the opening of this part of the summit, sending important signals also that the private sector needs to do its part of the job. And listening to the esteemed colleagues here from Ghana, EU and WTO, I'm struck by the sheer force of collective action, and particularly how we need more public-private partnerships on the scale we're hearing about today. This is essential if we are to keep the 1.5 degrees alive and protect and restore our forests and enhance livelihoods for those who live and work in these landscapes. Eliminating deforestation from global agriculture supply chains is critical to achieving net zero emissions by 2050. The companies who have combined an annual revenue of $500 billion have committed to create a shared roadmap for supply chain action that is consistent with a 1.5 degree pathway. The joint statement of action is a powerful example on how the private sector can be agents of transformation alongside governments, the finance sector, civil society, and communities. I would like to thank all the companies and their CEOs. They are ADM, Amaji, Bunge, Cargill, Golden Agri Resources, JBS, Louis Dreyfus Company, Ulam, Viterra, and Wilmar. Collectively, they handle more than half of global trade in the key commodities such as soy and palm oil. So this really makes a real difference when they do commit to also no deforestation in the future. The companies have committed to explore how they can jointly accelerate implementation of existing commitments to zero deforestation, how they can increase transparency on their Scope 3 emissions, how they can improve the livelihoods of farmers, and how they can highlight to governments the enabling policy environments needed to accelerate this type of action. The World Economic Forum is here to support this public-private collaboration. It is what we do the best and how we have confidence that we can work together to meet the Sustainable Development Goals. In our last report, the Tropical Forest Alliance outlined how demand for agricultural commodities has risen an astonishing 50% in the last 20 years. And with 1.8 billion people projected to enter the middle class before 2030, this is only set to grow. That is a stark reminder of the reality we face and why this type of action from our leading agricultural commodity trading companies is so vital if we are to reach our climate goals while also delivering on food security. We have no time to lose. Let's not move around deck chairs on Titanic. Let's roll up our sleeves and deliver on this promise. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Björge, for that ambitious announcement. It's really heartening to hear that the 10 major agricultural commodities traders responsible for half of all trade in agricultural commodities have made these pledges. Thank you so much for sharing. And thank you to you and the WEF for helping back and make this happen. Let me use this opportunity to thank all our speakers wholeheartedly for their interventions. Your remarks have shown that governments and private actors are taking concrete steps to ensure that trade makes a positive contribution to sustainable outcomes on forests and land use. We all now need to redouble our efforts to ensure that trade makes real changes in people's lives, both now and for generations to come. Thank you very much. And now let me hand over to our wonderful MC.
Thank you so much, Ngozi. Thank you both for staying with us. Thank you to the President of the European Commission and the President of Ghana. It has been such a pleasure having this as our closing session, because we do know that, as you have so clearly indicated, Ngozi, that we have to think about trade as one of the systemic shifts that address the way in which we protect our forests. So thank you both.
Thank you.
And may I lead you off to the left. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, and if there are any excellencies still in the room, all of you who are still watching, I feel as if I've run a marathon myself this morning. There have been so many incredible announcements. Such an important way to start our Cop26 commitments. We've been asked time and time again by the next generation, by the youth that are not in this room, that we must turn our words into action. That is what we were told as well time and time again today, not only by Indigenous peoples and community leaders, but by the leaders of so many countries. This has been an extraordinary event, with a huge thanks to our host country, to the distinguished guests, and to the unprecedented alliance of governments, companies, financial actors, and non-state leaders, all of whom have come forward with commitments. This is about mutual respect and solidarity. We have shifted the bar. How have we done that this morning? Please take note. 100 countries have committed to halt and reverse forest loss and land degradation by 2030. This is the decisive decade. Through the Glasgow Leaders' Declaration on Forests and Land Use, this is such a powerful demonstration of political will and collaboration from countries accounting for over 80% of the world's forests. Again, this has never been done before. But follow through, as we've all been saying today, is absolutely critical. This cannot be mere words. It cannot be a moment in time. We have seen substantial commitments to action today, and we must translate those 12 billion public climate finance to forests and the 7.2 billion private finance that now has been mobilized into capital that truly flows to protect the Congo Basin, to protect the Amazon, to protect our lungs across the globe. We have also seen commitments to begin the systemic shifts required to truly put the world on a path to deliver this 2030 goal. Multilateral development banks have committed to entrench nature in their policy and their operations. Promising public-private partnership has been announced through the LEAF Coalition. CEOs from more than 30 financial institutions with portfolios worth over 8.7 trillion of global assets say they will eliminate investment in activities linked to deforestation. And we've seen a unique offering from major traders to support supply chain action consistent with a 1.5 degrees Celsius pathway. This sets out a clear roadmap to Cop27, and it enables us to move forward. The launch of the FACT roadmap to deliver sustainable trade and reduce pressure on forests, which we've just heard about, including support for smallholder farmers and improving the transparency of supply chains, endorsed by 28 governments representing 76% of global trade in key commodities that can threaten forests. Yes, delivery is everything. We need urgent results and further commitments and action to underpin these fine words. Our next steps will be truly defining. That is how I leave you today. As was so promptly indicated, may we all get in the same canoe, using synergetic paddles to get us there. As we move on this pathway, this stream, which will become, we hope, many streams, to really shift deforestation, to stop deforestation, and to focus also our minds on regeneration. Thank you again to all of the incredible, esteemed leaders from the private and the public sector that have made truly a difference today. And thank you for staying here with me today as well. Stay safe.